everyone, welcome to Rewinding Founders. My name is Adi, and today we're talking to my very good friend, Magnus Sørdahl, who's been in automations and AI since before it was cool. And today he's going to tell us what he's been up to until now, what he's doing now, and see what we can learn from it. So, Magnus, how are you doing today?
Hello, I'm doing really well. Thank you so much for having me, Adi. I really appreciate it. And I just wanted to start with a small distinction, and that's that I've been working with expert systems which are rule-based automations instead of AI itself. So I'm kind of new into the AI world, but the concept of using AI through rules and those kind of systems, I'm very familiar with.
Thank you for the clarification. Definitely do not completely understand what it means, but I'm sure some people will. So I think if we roll back a little, could you tell me, how did you get started in entrepreneurship?
So on my family side, there's a lot of entrepreneurs. Basically, our modern history in our family is built on entrepreneurship. But where most people probably associate entrepreneurship now with tech and fancy and big companies, all we had was like a big or a small, it started as a small grocery store. But, at the time, this was probably around in the 50s or 60s or something like that. And it was a small community outside of Tromsø in northern Norway. And at the time, it was a big risk for our family to start that grocery store, which sounds so wild in these times we're in now. But, it's not easy managing a supply chain that goes literally to nowhere, I've always had this kind of like entrepreneurship in my veins, in my DNA. And as a kid, I looked at the school system when I was sitting there 8 hours a day, and I thought to myself, like, if this is what being a part of normal society is, then I'm not sure if I'm made for it, Ironically enough, I got both a bachelor's and a master's in innovation. So I think I got the Stockholm syndrome or something like that. But I started, embracing the aspect of learning stuff. So, but when I started my journey into entrepreneurship, I was I think it was during my master's, because as I mentioned, I've studied both the bachelor's and the master's in innovation. During like my first year during the master's, I realized that, whoa, this is like so much of this stuff I've had in the bachelor's. Why am I doing this again? And I got this kind of like existential crisis. And then I thought to myself, like, okay, I just have to do something else. So I decided to start a company.
I'm like curious because, for anyone watching, Magnus and I are friends unrelated to this podcast, and I'm learning already about you. So, okay, continue, yeah.
Hey, that's so nice. But yeah, so during my master's degree, the first company I started, it was a consultancy. And we got the opportunity because we were in this class and the lecturer asked the class if they told us straight up, like, hey, this really, in my town, it's a famous sports team. And they had conducted this huge analysis of, what people think about them and how they can. And they were wondering, like, how can we use this information to try to commercialize it, to try to sell more products or to get to know our people so we can improve our service. And this was during our first year, so we weren't really into the statistics, right? But they needed someone good with statistics to help them analyze this data. And it was really quiet. Nobody really said anything. So I just looked like across the lecture hall on my friend, and he looked back at me, and we were like, we nodded, like we thought, like, okay, we're crazy enough to do this. So we said, hey, we gladly like accept this, and we got it. We got this project. And what's so fun about this is that we knew that two of the good, like most accomplished lecturers in statistics, they were really nice people, and they loved this sports team. So we grabbed this project and we walked straight up to them and told them, like, hey, we have all this data we have to analyze and we have no idea how to do it. Like, how would you approach it? And they spent like half an hour or an hour just outlining how they would do and telling us like what we should focus on and what we should, disregard, because there was so much data. And we basically just did what they said. So I started my company, which was this small. It's not a limited company. It's like I'm personally responsible if legal stuff happens. I don't know what it's called in English. I'm sorry, I'm Norwegian. But yeah, and we did it, and we earned some money. That was super interesting and intriguing. And I had a couple of projects like that in this company, but that's when I realized that, okay, it's cool being a consultant and all that kind of stuff, but I want to try to make technology so I can scale and sell on a bigger scale. So that's when I joined a couple of friends of mine, which also were studying innovation. And we were like, okay, let's start our own company. And we had an interesting approach to this because we knew that there was this kind of a new technology back then, which is called QR codes, So it's not really that new right now, and I'm feeling really old. But back then it was kind of like, okay, this is an interesting technology. What can we build on it? And we were thinking to ourselves, okay, where does the physical plane meet the digital plane? And we discovered that, okay, we can make signs with QR codes on for people when they are hiking. So let's say that say that you need directions or you want to like learn more about the place that you are, then we had these signs with QR codes that you can scan and you can get those directions, but you can also buy like hunting licenses and fishing licenses through them, which was a huge issue in Norway back then. I'm not sure how it is right now, but it was a huge issue right then. And that's underlined by the fact that, as soon as we got this concept and the first person we talked to, like the first potential client we talked to, they were willing to pay us to make the product for them. So that just goes to show that we were onto something.
That's amazing. What happened next? Like what? Okay, so you wanted to make signs with QRs, and then how did it go?
Yes, so that's a really good question, and it's a bit of a sad story. So so at this stage, they mentioned their interest in our product, and we built a prototype. Like we knew nothing about making signs, but we like approached people that knew, and they were like, because we were students, they were like, they actually helped us, They didn't really help us in the sense of that they spent much time making the signs for us, but they were like, okay, we have this workshop, you can just use it and make your own signs. Yeah, that was amazing.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that one on the team knew someone there or something like that. But yeah, that's basically what happened. And the sign got so terrible, it looked so ugly. So we realized that, okay, we need someone with design experience, but we were all like business students. So we basically knew nothing about anything, So we went to, I don't remember what happened, but we approached different like marketing companies or design companies. And we told them that, hey, we need a sign to be made. Can you help us? And most of them said no, but one of them, since it was kind of like during the summer, so they didn't have much stuff to do. And they were like, sure, we can spend an hour or two on this. And they did, and they made it, and it looked so good and so professional. So we took basically their design and just stamped it on the sign. And of course, made our own QR code. And bam, we had the prototyping on the physical product at least, but the digital product remained. And while we were doing this, the product started taking form. And one of our team members, he presented this to the potential customer, and they were like, we are super interested in buying this. And we have a board meeting in 3 days. Can you come join us for the board meeting? And we said, yes, no problem. Because we didn't know much about business then, but we did know that not too many, like there aren't too often those kind of board meetings where those kind of decisions are being made. And this was a board meeting because they were like, how do I say it? They were run by volunteers. So this wasn't, your average professional company. But we said yes, and we had the physical sign-ish, but we didn't have anything digital, which is super important part of the equation, right? So we were like, one of us was assigned to make the prototype so that it could work on their phone and we can show them how the app would look. And one of us, me, got assigned to make the website so that they could like read more about the concept and stuff like that. So I got the easy end of the task because I just learned WordPress and I just made something quick. But the other guy, he had to like make it, and he chose, like looking back at it now that I know about technology, he chose the weirdest software to make it on, and but it kind of worked. And what we didn't really think about when we were doing this in our like panic to get this done was that the people we were going to show this to, they were, older people. They didn't care too much about the details of the tech. They just wanted to kind of like look us into the eyes and like get a feeling of whether we could make it or not. And if they trusted that gut feeling, then they would shake our hands on it and say, yes, let's do this. So because of the time limit, we got like, but we managed to make something. I remember staying up almost all night before we went to them and building the website to get it up and running. And that evening or that day was kind of hardcore because, we got like a 3 days notice. So we had to squeeze this into our week. And that day I was a seminar teacher in a course of innovation. I remember it very well because we also realized that it was a 3-hour drive back and forward to this board meeting. So we had to like get a car and we had to squeeze this into our days. And I remember I had to go to like the course, and I remember being grumpy when I was teaching this course because I hadn't slept all night, So I was like, yeah, raga, But yeah, we drove there and we had the meeting and we nailed it. Luckily, we had somewhere to stay so I could get a bit of sleep because we were driving my dad's car and I had to drive, I felt like, because I only trusted myself to drive the car. But yeah, so I got some sleep and then we drove back and that was it. We had our first client.
That's insane. How did you even know who to approach with that idea? Because when you think about signs in nature, like, how did you even know who a potential customer was?
That's a good question. For us, yeah, we were studying innovation, so we basically didn't know anything about anything. One of us was a huge, nature guy, and he knew. In Norwegian, this is called turlag. I don't know how to say it in English. It's like they have these regions close to where they live, and they are basically in charge of administering the hikes of those kind of regions. So his hypothesis was that they would have like a special interest in these kind of signs. And of course, like we had no idea about their potential purchasing power or the size of the market at this stage. We just knew that this is something that we can deliver and we can deliver it for free. And we also knew that there was this carrot on a stick in the shape of if we manage to actually distribute fishing licenses and hunting licenses through our app, we would be able to generate like a noteworthy amount of revenue. So that was kind of like our general hypothesis, and we just took it from there and trusted our gut feeling.
What surprised you about the whole thing? Because it sounds like, in a way, it was very much easy. Like, you found a potential client, they want the product, you give them the product. Like, did anything surprise you?
Yes. So, and this is a huge personal teaching, learning experience for me because you're right. Like, except for the blood and tears and sweat that we put into this and the lack of sleep, but everything went too perfect, and we saw this clear trajectory to getting funded, to getting more clients, and it just looked so good. And I think that made the team friction started in the team. We had these different kind of members that were contributing differently, and at the start we just went for an even split because we had this kind of naive idea that everyone would put in equal amount of efforts, and if we didn't, then we would talk about it and work it out. But what happened was that one put in much more effort than the others, and he didn't really bring it to the team that he was feeling frustrated with the amount of effort he was putting in compared to the rest of us. And that made him understandably so very frustrated. And because of that, like the friction started in our team and we couldn't control it. So actually, what happened was that he offered to buy us out from the company so he could like continue running it on his own. So
Interesting.
yeah, that's like the how to say it? That's the bad part of the story, the sad part about it.
Yeah. Well, you learn from everything, I guess. I'm sure you feel differently. Have you worked with co-founders since?
No, actually
Always
not.
being solo.
Yes, and that was a huge part of it. And to get a bit too personal, I was technically the CEO of the company when this happened. And I think if I knew then what I know now about working with people and being able to talk about things that even when you're feeling insecure about it or unsure about it, then I think I would have been able to manage it. But back then, I was too naive. I kind of believed in the group dynamic and that we would be able to work it out together without me taking charge. I was probably a bit afraid of taking charge as well. So what happened was that it turned out to this piece that we couldn't control, that it resulted in this fraction of the company.
And then what happened?
I probably got a bit too traumatized about that because I decided then and there that the next projects, it wouldn't be with other people. I wanted to be the main man of the project so I could onboard people when I needed them under terms that I define so that I don't get too dependent on them or whatever. And I realized that this is far from a perfect approach, and it's something I've been working on, being able to kind of trust people again. That sounds too dramatic, but I hope that understand what I mean. But the next step for me was to find a footing again. Like after this project, I didn't have much money to invest. Even though they bought me out of the company, I didn't really make money on it. And I realized that okay, I gotta get some money. I have to find a job, and I was a bit tired of this entrepreneurship stuff as well. So I applied for a bank, even though I really like creating stuff, and I've always loved creating stuff. I studied innovation. I had this passion in my belly about creating something new, giving something new to society. So why did I choose to work as a financial advisor in a bank? For me, it was a mix of different things. First of all, I wanted a stable job, stable income, safe income. I wanted to learn more about finance and how the world works. Because when you think about it, the world sadly evolves around finance in a way, economics at least. And the third aspect of it was that I could, like the job I was given, a part of it was to run a local branch office that was out in nowhere. So the job was like an appealing prospect for a great adventure in addition to learning about finance and, this financial disability. So these kind of things aligned up for me to become a company man.
Okay. How did it feel to move from, because I've also had that switch that feels a little uncomfortable, unnatural to like go from entrepreneur vibe to I have a job. And it felt weird to me. How did you experience that? The transitioning from being an entrepreneur to being employed, to being not necessarily in charge of the way you spend your time all the time, and just, it's a completely different mindset. And I think it's something that a lot of beginning entrepreneurs go through when they're doing different projects. And sometimes you do feel like you have to go down a little before you go up again. And like, how did you experience that?
Yes, that's a good question. Honestly, I didn't really think too much about it at the time because all I saw was this new adventure slash challenge that I had to excel at. So I guess you could say that I felt like I really had something to prove. Even though I've always had something to prove my entire life, I feel. In this aspect where I was feeling kind of down from the failed company and I had to kind of get back on my feet. And this new job was my first step into, a normal full-time job. So I felt like I had so much I had to prove within the constraints of, a normal 8 to 4 job. It wasn't all that bad in the beginning because I had so much to learn, and I really like learning stuff and understanding how systems work. So I just took a really big dive into it, and I remember my boss because you had to learn all this stuff about finance in order to become a certified financial advisor. And I remember my boss like knocked on my office one day and said like, "Hey, it's really good that you're taking such a deep dive into this job and this certification and how to do it, but you got to remember to talk to your coworkers as well." And I was too busy, I was too busy doing the certification in like a record short amount of time and all that kind of stuff that I actually a bit forgot the human aspect of being in an organization. So I guess you could say that, yeah, I had this chip on my shoulder when I came into it, but I didn't really feel bad, or I didn't really feel like it was a defeat for me to get back into the job, if that makes sense. But, oh, I'm sorry, I just have to say this. When I was done with helping them, because the local branch was never going to be run long term by a newly employed, right? When I was when I was done with helping them getting more people employed there, basically I just kept it running so they can employ more people to stay there. But when I was done with that and I returned to the normal job, 8 to 4, and I realized that, whoa, there's actually like a limit to how much I'm supposed to learn here. When I was getting into, the deeper foundations of investment strategies and macro analytics and all that kind of stuff, and I started talking to my coworkers about that, they just looked at me strange. And that's when started to realize that, okay, I'm not supposed to learn more about this because I was learning so much. I was turning myself and my job into an analytics job, and that wasn't why I was hired. And when I realized that, then I also realized that this wasn't something for me because I feel like I have to learn something new every day. Or, yeah, if I don't get to like learn something new or challenge myself on a new area every day, then I will get bored.
And then you decided to move on.
Yes.
Interesting. Was that decision, was it scary? Was it exciting? How did you feel?
That transition was so, how to say it, unique, in a lack of a better word. Maybe you'll find a better word when I'm done with telling you why this transition was so unique. So at this stage, I was in northern Norway at a small city where I didn't have much family or friends. I had some, but not much. And I realized that the city was a bit too small for me as well. So I moved back to the city that I started in, and I got a job there, basically doing the same thing, but more in a more senior position. And as I did that, I also started working on my own trading strategy because I realized that in Norway, we only have a couple of rule-based funds. Most of our funds and ETFs, they are run by qualitative analytics, people that look at stuff and analyze and they discuss amongst themselves. But there are always people involved in the process. And that's when I realized that most of my own portfolio was based on people doing the analytics and doing the investments. And I realized that if I want to hedge my own portfolio even more, and hedge being that if I want to like help ensure that I have more of a stable portfolio according to the long-term goals I have for it, then I would not be dumb. It would maybe even be smart of me to start thinking about rule-based trading strategies. Besides, and let's be honest, for most of us, like 99.99% of us, we will lose money if we try to make an automated investment strategy. That's almost like a fool's game because it requires so much of you. But I knew this going in, but I still wanted to create something, That's what I've been lacking, being able to create something and learn something. So this was my opportunity to learn software development. This was my opportunity to create something, a software that does something on behalf of me. And I could use my skills in finance to at least get a prototype going. Like I knew enough to get an automated trading strategy going, even though it wouldn't make me money. I knew enough to get it going. So as I started doing this new project in our bank arose. Basically, it was at this stage, I was working in a big department in our bank. We had a lot of financial advisors and customer service agents and all that kind of stuff, a lot of different fields of expertise into this department. And it was so big that one of the bosses suggested, okay, maybe we should try to automate stuff in this department, that we do it ourselves. And they asked for us, like, hey guys, do you have any automation developer experience? And they sent this like mass email to us, which I think is so cool. Like the old school leaders would probably criticize that, but I think that's such a cool way to approach it. And I saw who sent the email, and I checked out where in the building she resided at and which floor. And so I just walked up there and said, hey, I'm Magnus and I'm super interested in this project. And she said, oh, that's so cool. Thank you for contacting me. What's your expertise in development and automations development? And I told her, well, I don't really have any. And she was like, wait. Well, and then she gave me like the politically acceptable answer of like, oh, thank you for showing up. Like, yeah, thank you. I will definitely keep you in mind. And I got that feeling when I talked to her, yes. So I went home and I downloaded the software that they wanted to use to make these kind of automations. And then I made one automation over the weekend, just super easy automation to show them the concept. And I filmed that automation and I made it like, say something cheesy like hi to both her and her boss or something like that. And I sent her the film. And then like that, like I was onboarded to the project and I became an automations developer. Well, first I started as a citizen automations developer, which basically means that I don't have the software experience. I'm a citizen that can dabble in making automations. Yes.
Not bad for one night's work.
No, it was a weekend, but who's counting?
I have so many thoughts. When you were doing that, when you were doing automations, is that something that you thought was going to be interesting before? Or like what made you?
There were several components to this, factors to this. The first one was that I was making this project in a spare time, right? What I mentioned about the automated trading strategy. And it was it was tiring. I have to work 40 hours per week, if not 50 hours, and then go home and work on this project, which is a huge project if I want to ever be able to make something out of it, Or I could spend 40 hours or 50 hours per week working on building my own competence and skills in something. That was like the main factor for me wanting to go into automations development. And at this stage, as I mentioned earlier, I realized that I want to learn every day at job when I'm working. And since I have more of a business-oriented background, I didn't really see myself getting a job even as a junior software developer. So this was perhaps my only like short-term way in to start with technology development. And I just went for it, you know. So that was the main factor. But another factor is that I saw the writing on the wall with AI. And basically I thought to myself, if I get good at making automations, when AI becomes a thing, I will probably be good at integrating AI into the workflows of either people or automations because I know how they are built. And this is a bit of digression, but I'm super proud of being correct with that assessment. And I hope I'm not sounding like I'm bragging too much. Right now, with what we are seeing with AI and how we could use it, like, I'm so happy and excited and curious nowadays and thankful. Yes.
Wow, that's so interesting. What made you decide to go now back to the more entrepreneurial side? Because it sounds like you know, you had it figured out and it was going well.
Yes. So I was having a really good time making these automations in the bank, and I saw the impact they had. For me, the experience as an automations developer is so fascinating because you see, like, the very concept of automation development is very return on investment oriented, right? It's all about asymmetrical business cases. And since you're making these business cases in-house, then you know the different kind of factors that you want to like include when you're calculating the effect on the automations. And when you're good at doing that, then you can see what kind of automations would make what kind of effect when you implement them in the organization. So the whole concept of automations development in an organization is about chasing ROI, chasing stockholder money and return on investment and all that kind of stuff. And we save the bank so much money. But in a way, we weren't recognized. So I got to play around with this and it was amazing. And the right people recognized us and our efforts. And I really appreciated that. But at the same time, we could do so much more. But since we weren't recognized by the other people that were so important in deciding to let us branch out and be more ambitious or not, they didn't really trust us enough to do that. That kind of put a limiting, let's call it limiting embrace. It was very limiting, at least, to our efforts and my enthusiasm about being automations developer. And when AI then became a thing, at the very beginning of AI, and I took this to my boss and I said, hey, I want to play around with this. And the response I got was that, oh no, it's a very scary technology. Or we have to do a risk assessment first, and then we will see in like 1 year. But I thought to myself, by the speed of implementation and the new every week we see something new and groundbreaking. And I just thought to myself that I don't want to be limited by someone else's, opinions on this matter. I want to be my own captain on this ship so I can decide what to do and when to do it.
How do you think you've changed over this time? Because I'm assuming Magnus, who signs up to studying innovation, and Magnus, who starts working in a bank, and Magnus now, that is opening another company, it's not the same person. Or is it? How do you see it?
Well, I didn't know we were going to be philosophical and existential here, Ade. You should have prepared me.
Yeah.
Yeah, who am I compared to those people? One thing is for sure, and that's that I know a lot more about how society works in a way. Being an entrepreneur is very cutthroat by nature. Like, you don't really have many safety nets to hold you if something goes wrong. And you are your own, the creator of your own fortune. You have to be able to sell what you have. You have to be able to build it. You have to bear so much different kind of responsibility, and you have to be able to achieve what you're setting out to do, both on behalf of yourself, but also on behalf of your customers. So I would say that the main difference between who I am now and who I was is that I know and I know about accountability and being able to be accountable for something on an emotional level, not just solving the task, but actually taking it and taking accountability of it and really understand the implications of what happens if I don't achieve it, or if I do achieve it with better than expected. If I do better than the expectations that are being set to the task that I'm given. Because as a student, and even when I started working, there was someone else accountable for my actions, if that makes sense. When I was starting the company as a student, I didn't really appreciate or recognize what would happen if I didn't take accountability to the first things, when the first cracks started showing up in the teamwork. And when I was working for the company, then my boss was technically accountable for my actions there, if that makes sense. Of course, if I do something absolutely out of the line, which no normal person would do, but if I did that, then I would be accountable. But as a normal employee, then the boss is, per definition, in Norway at least, accountable of your actions and how you do it. So I didn't really feel that much ownership, but also I didn't really feel that much stress and the downsides of being accountable of those kind of things when I was employed. But now when I'm in my own company and by myself, I'm 100% accountable of everything I do within this company. And that's a scary thought, but at the same time, the opportunities that comes from that and the ownership is a very enticing thought as well.
What do you think about made you prone to want that sort of responsibility, accountability? Not everyone wants to be an entrepreneur. Some people want to, but actually don't enjoy that part that you're talking about now, that it's it's all on me. Some people like to think they like it, and I mean, I can say that from my experience, I realized that I actually don't want to be CEO, probably. I enjoy being the founding team. I enjoy being the number 2 or 3 or building something. But I learned, that I don't necessarily want. And it sounds like you learned, I do want that.
Ooh. That's a good question. For me, responsibility it can be super stressful if you really, if you take it too seriously in a way. If you dive too deeply into the responsibility and the hypothetical ramifications of what if I do that, what if I don't do that, etc., etc. The way I see it, as long as you are abiding by the law, and maintaining and upholding your contracts, there's so much that everything else is hypothetical situation. Everything else is making it to be a bigger problem than it is. So that's the way I go. I can see that you're a bit of a question mark now, but that's the way I go to thinking about the negative sides of responsibility that we often see. The thing is that all these scary negative things, they go hand in hand with the positive things, which is the potential upside of what if it goes right. I'm deploying one autonomous system these days, and you have the negatives of what if it breaches the law, and every time it does something automatically, it adds another, case, the court case or whatever. Hypothetically, it could be if I'm breaching some kind of a terms of service, right, with the system, then it would be very bad for me to have an autonomous system that breaches terms every time it does something, right? That it just stands there and spam breaches terms 24/7. That wouldn't be nice. But on the other hand, if that system can create engagement, if it can create money in, or it can create efficiencies, that upside is a very intriguing one. And that's what I've kind of learned to embrace as I accept more accountability and I accept more responsibility. That unless I'm doing something wrong, then more responsibility will bring me more opportunities.
True. I mean, when you're willing to put yourself at risk, which, risk is a big word. I mean, in the end of the day, most people who can listen to this are quite fortunate enough that even if they fail, most likely they have somewhere to stay. But yeah, I think it's a very interesting thing you say. It's like, I'm willing to take on the risk and the stress. Like, there could be very big upside.
Yes, and I didn't get here without working on myself, I believe that mental health and good mental health is super important as an entrepreneur. It's like, it should be the very foundation of being an entrepreneur. And since I have your ears and hopefully your listeners' ears as well, I want to make out of a point that I feel is overlooked in entrepreneurship, which is that if you have this stable job and if you consider quitting this job to make your company, for instance, before you do that, I would encourage you to take a look in the mirror and ask yourself, how am I doing mentally? Because mental health, like with all this stress, sure, you have the upsides, but you have so many potential downsides. Per definition, like your job as an entrepreneur is to be a problem solver, and that brings so much stress onto your shoulders, so much responsibility. Even if it's contracts or expectations, you have to provide for your own family and all that kind of stuff. You have to provide for your employees. You have to be able to pay your tax on time. So many responsibilities. So before you take a deep dive into that, even if your company goes as perfect as you would ever imagine it would be, you will still have so much responsibilities. You will still have other providers or the tax man looking over your shoulder. So please consider your mental health. Make your mental health a project before you quit your job. Because believe me, working on your mental health is infinitely more difficult when you have all this stress around you. When you're struggling to pay your bills or employees, or you're wondering whether or not you will be able to, pay out a wage for the next month. So yes, start with your mental health.
I think that's a perfect ending. Thank you. Wow. Thank you so much for your time and for bringing this topic up, which I think is super important and is also part of why this podcast even exists, because we like, even not the actual risk or issues that we have. I think a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with comparing themselves to people who are much further ahead, and it affects where they are personally. So I think what you said right now is super, super true. And I would love, just before we finish, and thank you again, for you to tell us, for anyone who's listening, where they can find you, your project, like what are you working on now?
Thank you so much for the nice message, Adi. They can find me on LinkedIn, Magnus Sørdahl. I hope that you will write it so they can save, because it's like, yes, it's a unique Norwegian name. Please look me up on LinkedIn, and if you found this or any of my thoughts or concepts interesting, please let me know. I'm open for collaborations, either as a consultant in the automation space, but also if you have an interesting business case, I would definitely be interested in looking at that. Yeah, and thank you so much again, Adi, and thank you to you guys for listening.